Hi, everyone, and welcome back to The Things We Know. Again, we are in July. We're doing sort of a summer version of the pod where everything's just sort of, yeah, cheers to that
Cheers.
summer version, but we're both drinking reds. We should be drinking probably a nice Sauvignon Blanc or something, but I do love a red. Yep, so we're doing sort of lighthearted things, so to speak, with just kind of our favorite books and movies and this week's documentaries, and then we're going to talk about music. What else did we? There was something else we talked about, and I can't remember what it is.
Books?
Yeah, books. Oh, TV. Books,
Yeah.
TV,
What we're
movies.
watching.
Today's documentary, and then next week is music.
I will
So,
say this, like knowing we were going to do this, it definitely, brought more books back into circulation and it definitely
totally.
got me watching more, which I don't know if is a good or bad thing. Because you know this about me, Lisa, and I'll share this now and it's a little bit embarrassing. Like I am sometimes like there's so many great things out there.
Yes.
And if it weren't for you or you and Darren or my kids, like sometimes I wouldn't even know the new things to watch. Although it was my kids who got me watching The Bear, but and Beef and stuff. But it's not that I don't want to watch those things. It's like I put them on my list, but I never get to them, and I'm always a little afraid to commit to them. But there's something weird about me, like when I'm got a lot going on or something stressful, especially something medical, someone I love. I will go back and rewatch things, and I'm not really rewatching them like I have them on, but I might be doing something else. But there's something really comforting about
Yeah.
some old favorites.
Yeah.
Or I go back and watch something someone recommended to me like 8 years ago, and it really cracks people up.
Yeah.
They're like, I told you to watch that like 8 years ago. So, what I
Yeah.
am noticing about these conversations is it's getting me current.
Yeah. Huzzah.
I'm catching up on the things I wanted to watch and read and listen to. So,
Yeah, it's funny because I'm a little bit like that too. I don't tend to jump, as I think I said a couple weeks ago, I don't tend to jump on the zeitgeist necessarily. And so it'll take like I just started watching Hacks, and I was telling you about this the other day. Amazing, so good. But that's been around for a while, but
mhm.
then the upside to that, like with Loot, is they have seasons. So
I
I do
know.
get to binge a little bit. Although that being said, what we're recording this in June, we're 7 days out from season 3 of The Bear. I
Mm.
am going to do my best not to binge The Bear because I really I want to enjoy it.
I want to savor it,
I
and
want to
and being
savor
a
it.
being a gastronomical show, maybe that's like the way to think of it.
Well, it's funny because I remember thinking season 1, like I couldn't, there's no way I could binge this because it was so anxiety ridden for me. I don't know that I feel that way now. So it's going to be a active choice not to watch all of them at once. So
Mm.
anyway, so today we're talking about documentaries, and you just sort of randomly said this last week when we were talking about movies. You said, "Oh, we should do one on documentaries," and then you and I both that night ended up watching Bratz. So we thought we would start with that one. And if you don't know
Oh
what
my
Bratz is,
gosh.
it is the documentary that Andrew McCarthy made, going back and trying, I would say, to come to grips with the title, The Bratpack, and what seemingly that did to him, that what he calls destroyed his career. I
Did he say? Yeah, I think you're right. I just don't
yeah,
remember. He said destroy. I mean, I definitely thought he said derailed, but maybe he did say destroy.
maybe he said derail, but and we're not going to do any spoilers because I do think if you are of a certain age, if you are a Gen X woman and the men who love them, I mean, Darren happily sat down. Sounds like Brendan did too. Happily sat down and watched this with us because if you love movies, I mean, if you are our age, you watched all those. And what I thought was really interesting, there was a couple of pieces. One, watching Andrew McCarthy come to grips with what that meant, what he sort of, I would say, sort of self-sabotage himself in some ways by taking
Mm.
that to mean something about him. And then the funniest part, though, is that nobody could really decide who was in the Brat Pack.
Well, okay, I want to back up because I don't think this is a spoiler. Like there was an article in the New
Yes,
Yorker, right? Was
yes,
it the New
yes.
York or New York Magazine? It was New York
New York
Magazine.
Magazine, yes.
I'm forgetting the name of the reporter. He
Mm-hmm.
was doing a piece on Emilio Estevez,
Yep.
and even though some of them were friends, a lot of them just happened to be movie adjacent in a couple of movies. But this is what was happening in that time in the 80s. Suddenly, for the first time ever, there was a lot of movies being produced for and aimed at and featuring teenagers, like, and they were aimed at the like 16 to 20-year olds.
Yeah.
First time ever. And there was a lot of actors that were like coming of age during that time and working really hard and trying to be part of that. And some were on the older end, like Andrew McCarthy was trained and he went to college and, like was studying it. And some kids were like breakout actors. And so there's a lot of kids, including Sean Penn and Tom Cruise and, there was someone else you and I were
Timothy
discussing.
Hutton was sort of, he called him the kind of the godfather.
Yeah.
I thought
There was
that
a
was
lot
cute.
of young people that were also, Michael J. Fox. There was like a lot of people in movies at that time. And they were in some with these people, but it turned out that it was like the cast of St. Elmo's Fire and the cast of Breakfast Club that really became the epicenter of this idea, because Emilio Estevez was in both of them and his career was exploding. He was just starting to do Young Guns and he was getting all those things as well. This reporter went out with him. He invited Rob Lowe and Judd Nelson. And they were having a great time. They were young, just like we see all the time now with like young people coming of age and they're experiencing the same thing.
Yep.
And he went out with them and he didn't dislike them. And he just was trying to come up with a theme for it. And somebody at like some meeting he was at called this group of reporters the Fat Pack because they had been eating like a really big meal. And he thought that was a funny play on Rat Pack, which is, as you know, like the Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra group.
Yep.
He thought that was funny. And then he came up with Bratpack because there were this young group. He made it sound like they all hung out together. He thought it was fun. It was like clever. He still stands by that. It was just a way of thinking of them. Here's what's interesting. And this is the whole, like, and then we get into like what you were saying about his coming of age thing is it's interesting to watch. And by the way, Brendan sat down happily and watched it with me, but it reminds me that he never liked Andrew McCarthy. Like as an actor, he always bugged him. I'm like, I love
Darren too, but I think he's a cutie patootie.
I think he's
still
adorable.
think he is.
I know, me too. And I liked Rob Lowe a lot. I still do. I find it like the waves of his career just better and better and funnier and all that. But anyway, he was a heartthrob for me. But anyway, watching it, it's so hard to not watch it with without seeing all the other things about it. We're coaches, so we can see like, oh, isn't that interesting? Depending on who you were in that group, what you made it mean and how it affected everything else. And it's awesome to see him kind of come to terms with that. But the other things that came up for me is like, they didn't hang out. They didn't even know each other other than like they haven't seen each other in 35 years. Some of them were so young, like Molly and who else was? Oh, not Ali Sheedy. Guy who was the younger
John
kid.
Cryer? Michael Hall.
Anthony Michael Hall. Why is he never discussed in that group? I have no idea. Because he was in a lot of movies, including
he was in Breakfast Club.
He didn't get that stain, or maybe he did, but they never discussed him. He never came up even at all. But anyway, those two were so young. They were like 16, so they of course weren't going out and hanging out with these people. So I can see why it would be frustrating and weird to be labeled part of this group. And then the whole idea of this documentary, as you say, is that label diminished them, made them feel diminished and less respected and almost became a joke. Like they were just like, they didn't deserve it. It was like, they didn't say white privilege, but that's sort of what's implied. And the other thing about watching it now, as we've faced many times, you look at these John Hughes movies that were so coming of age for us and they were so white. And so this whole thing, and I'm glad it came up. I'm glad. But
I thought it was that part in particular. I thought was interesting because I am well versed in Wilmette, Illinois, and it is still as white as it was in the John Hughes days. So John Hughes was writing. It was accurate then. It's accurate now. I mean, he was writing from a place. Right, what totally. It's interesting to me. What's so funny about the not understanding who was in the Bratpack is, to me, and I think this is true, the article came out around St. Elmo's fire. And so to me, the Bratpack has always been Demi, Ali Sheedy, Judd,
So
Rob.
Molly just got
But
kind of
Molly was, but
accidentally
then you bring in Breakfast Club, and those seem to be the
and Pretty in
two like
Pink.
anchors, right? But
Yes.
that's just it. Like John Cryer's like, I was never part of the Brat Pack. Mare Winningham is in St. Elmo's Fire. She's not part
She
of the
was in her
Brat
mid
Pack.
20s when they made
Well,
Cinema Fire.
exactly.
Yeah. You're
I mean,
right.
it's just it is fine. Anthony Michael Hall. I mean, I don't think he's not doesn't have a career that most people know, but he's been in a lot of horror films. When I went to the Halloween
Yeah.
25th or 45th, sorry, convention, he was there, so he's
Yeah.
gone a different route. He's not the guy he was in Breakfast Club and 16 Candles and so forth. So yeah, I think the thing that is interesting to me, and is, did it diminish them or did they allow it to diminish them?
Okay. And here, I want to come back to this because I think that's the meatiest part of this. But I also want to say the other big part that you and I texted about that I don't want to forget to mention is wow, the timestamp of that one article
Right.
really, really hurt them. And I just wonder if the Justin Biebers of today are like, are you kidding me? I get shit tweeted about me all day long. And
That's just
like the
absolutely.
Twitter world that we're in now, is it easier because it's just so much noise versus it's true, Lisa. Like I watched them. I watched all those movies. I love those people. And as soon as they were called Brat Pack, I went along with that. I'm like, oh, they're the Brat Pack. They hang out all the time. I didn't think about it, but one
But it didn't
article, one
bother me.
label out there
But that's my point. It didn't
gave me that
diminish it
idea.
to me though. Like I didn't look at them
Right.
and I thought,
But
oh,
I
it's
don't
a
think they
cute
feel diminished with fans. I think they feel diminished with filmmakers.
that, or they just did it to themselves. That's the thing
Mhm.
that I think is so interesting. Like, first off, it Emilio Estevez, I think it's so fascinating to me because the article was about him, and then it was like the minute it came out, he just like dropped everything.
He just was
And
like,
yeah,
yeah.
and like screwed over Andrew on a movie opportunity. And even in the
Sounds like he
interview,
screwed over himself too. Yeah.
well, that's just it.
Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting because I think of all those people, Emilio is actually a Nepo baby. You know what I mean? And like, and so maybe that was why it hurt him worse. I mean, it's fascinating because he's still clearly angry about it. I mean, he said the only reason he did this was because Andrew called him an nasty, but he has never talked about this before. Then you go the opposite end, right? And Molly isn't in it. She chooses not to be in it. Judd's not in it, although a weird like call at the end. I'm not sort of surprised about that because I've heard he's kind of I mean, I've heard things that he's not, really in the public eye anymore. Um, but then, the two that have had the biggest careers, although certainly up and down for sure, Demi and Rob, they're just like,
They've done the work. It's
they've
so
done the
clear.
work. They're both in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
The way Demi talks, I'm like, I looked at Darren at one point, I'm like, she's a life coach. Like
I
she
know.
is literally using our language and talks about to Andrew, sort of, I think that's really where he comes to grips with, we got to make this mean something about us. But they were in their early 20s. In your early 20s,
Yeah.
you make everything mean something about you.
And
But
they didn't have the pop psychology behind them that we have
totally did
now. Like
not.
they didn't have, like we are living. I mean, you saw Inside Out too recently.
Jesus.
We are now living at a time where we can actually normalize complex emotions and
Yeah.
lack of things that would make you really fragile for like just the lack of foundation that wouldn't
Yeah.
prepare you for something like that.
But
I don't know.
then I do think, to go back to your point, when you think about the stars of today, I mean, think about how many actors that are their age now. So we're talking
Mhm.
the Timothy Chalamets, the oh my God, what's his Spider-Man? All I can think of is Zendaya.
Tom
Tom Holland. Um, Tom Holland in particular. I
or
know he's
Zendaya.
and Zendaya, right? But
Yeah.
like they've gone off. I know Tom Holland has gone off social media. I remember seeing that
Yeah.
because they're like, I can't. I don't want to. I don't want to deal with the
I think
noise.
Ed Sheeran said something like that. I know he's a little older, but he had to go completely off. He
A
had to
lot
get
of
rid of
them
his
do.
phone.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, really you can poo this and one of the things you said in a text to me was like, I hope this doesn't make everybody think they're whiny, but we're not talking about 59-year-old people having this experience. We're talking about 20-year-olds having this experience. And sure, you can say, oh, but they had all the privilege in the world. Actors are actors. I have birthed
Human.
an actor. I know they're
They're
human, right? That's what I
human.
meant. Actors, but they work. I have friends that poo-poo celebrity, and it pisses me off because I'm like, yes, there is celebrity. There's the Paris Hiltons of the world and the Kardashians. They've done nothing to deserve in my opinion, what they've got, except they're really good marketers. But somebody like these kids now, the actors, the Bratpack, then they are doing a job. You can hard eye roll your all day long about actors, but I have one in my house. I know how hard she works. This it Being an actor is just a different kind of job. And if you as a 20-year-old were working at a retail store and you were getting constant barrage of negative, you would lose your shit too. So it
It
just
goes, yeah, sorry, go ahead. I
no,
just,
go ahead.
I was thinking of this. I was thinking of Charlotte and her friends, because also like Charlotte and her friends that I know of that I've met, including the boys she dated, like they're also good at a lot of other things.
Right.
And yet like this calls to them. Or how do you say Kalal? Like how do you say his
Kalai.
name? Kalai.
Yeah.
He wasn't really even there for acting, right? But
No,
he
he's there for
came.
music. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, watching the craft call to people.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about that. I've been thinking about that and like working it out, and just the courage it takes. And without the development that, you're going to have at that age, to be out in the world getting such cold, hard criticism,
Yeah.
taking it and being willing to show up early and just sit in, like, whenever you listen to anyone who's made it, they have a million humbling stories. And
Yep.
humbling is putting it nicely.
Yeah.
Humiliating stories of sitting in there and like having someone choose someone before they even saw you, or you're still in the room walking out and they're already talking about who they chose. But I was listening to John Goodman on Smartless talk about this, and he was like, honestly, it was the only thing I was good at. Like, I tried other things. I couldn't even be a waiter or a bouncer. Like, it was just like, this was the only thing I was good at. And I think there's so much courage and just something to it. People forget how much work it is. It is not for wimps. It's not like the easy way out. When I think of just the old mentality, even that song that the Dire Straits sang about MTV, about rock
Oh
stars,
yeah.
like,
Mm-hmm.
look, like that's the way you do it. You play your
Yeah.
guitar and you get paid. Like, people get paid all this money. Yes, obviously, I think it's terrible that, teachers won't make what an actor makes in an episode. Like, they won't make it in a lifetime sometimes.
Right.
Yes. And I don't think any of those actors would disagree with that.
Right.
However, these are grueling hours and sometimes dehumanizing treatment. And like inhuman treatment. And some of them are living in their cars. And I think we forget that. We group all actors with stars.
Right.
And like, that's what we were hearing in this documentary, was like, they were trying to work. Their careers were just beginning and they were
Yeah.
super excited to be part of this bubble. And that was a very mean-spirited, accidentally callous thing to label them. And it really scattered them. And then they didn't talk to each other for 35 years because they thought even associating was bad for them. And they got probably bad advice and didn't have the supports around them that they
Yeah.
needed.
Yeah. No, I agree. No, I think that's all. Yeah. I really, really thought it was good. And for the most part, the people I've talked to thought it was good as well. And I feel like in the end, everybody came, everybody had a moment of closure, of closure,
Mm,
you know.
yeah.
Yeah, no, and I told you this, but I can't let it go without the shout outs to Dayton
Oh,
because Emilio is Martin Sheen's son, obviously from Dayton, as is Rob Lowe. Of course, he grew up out here, but his family is from Oakwood. So
um,
lots of Dayton represent in the Brat Pack.
they're all pretty adorable. I will
Yeah.
say this also, like, why wasn't Kevin Bacon part of the Bratpack? but I guess he didn't really do a lot of
I mean,
crossover
Six
movies.
Degrees, he is in some way, shape, or form.
That's true. Can make it connected to
He's
everybody.
in everything. He's in
I
everything.
follow he and his wife just because they are freaking adorable. They live on that farm and he does a lot of music stuff. Like
Yeah. I
there's
mean, that
aspects
is
of him that remind me a little bit of Darren. Like he's just
mm,
kind of got this like really sweet,
that is
aging
a
sort of rock star actor dad.
amazing love story,
I
success
know.
story from Hollywood. Of course, they
I
got out of
know.
Hollywood, but that probably helped. Yeah, no,
They're
I thought
they're
it
pretty
was great.
adorable.
And then talking about working hard. I mean, we mentioned this, I think, in another episode, but the greatest night in rock and roll, I think, or the greatest night in music,
Yes.
about We Are the World recording. That was mind blowing. I am not necessarily a fan of that song, as I said in the last time I talked about this, but I absolutely enjoyed that documentary and had no, once again, you think, oh, these rock stars, but they worked really hard to put that song together and to watch them fan over each other. I think, as always, you assume, as you said earlier with the Bratpack, that they're all just buddy buddy and they hang out all the time. They don't. And so when they're in the room with people they admire, they're fangirling, for lack of a better word. And that was super fun to watch.
I think that, and we may have mentioned this, so if you listen to us, always thank you. And
Yeah.
sorry for the repeats. I feel like my husband's still always catching up. So I don't know if my own husband isn't like as current and maybe other people aren't. So maybe you missed this, but I will repeat it. There was a lot of assumptions I had. And I will say both of us have visceral love and just energy and memories of Feed the World, of,
Yes.
do they know it's Christmas?
Yep.
And to know that Bob Geldof was part of helping Harry Belafonte make this happen. And I love Harry Belafonte. Like actually that piece of the documentary made me
Yeah.
even love it more. But I will admit, because I was so fascinated by a lot of them, that when I saw that video for the first time, my brain remembered how each of them sang each part of that song. And so I get chills when I hear it, even though yeah, it's fine. Like I loved them enough to like the song at the time. It just wasn't my favorite. But I made a lot of assumptions because it looked like Michael was filmed separately. I assumed they were lucky to get him and he wouldn't be around anyone. So the biggest surprise for me, and there was a lot of surprises there. I had forgotten about the American Music Awards. I had forgotten they had a category called Black Artist. That's so interesting. Like what?
So of
And
the times.
right. And he was hosting it. He won a ton of awards. He was performing.
Lionel
And
Richie, not Michael Jackson.
I'm
Lionel
sorry,
Richie.
Lionel Richie. I
Yeah.
switched over. Sorry. Lionel Richie was hosting it,
Yep.
presenting, winning a bunch of awards, and performing a couple times, and was really became the lead on this. He was the one working with Michael. He was supposed to work with Michael and Stevie Wonder to write it, and Stevie Wonder wasn't reachable. So they end up with, he and Michael end up working together. So to find out that Michael wrote this song.
Yeah.
He was a big part of it. He actually stepped out of a couple places to let other people have turns. That was really neat for me to realize because it wasn't at all what I assumed.
Yeah.
So I made that assumption. I had always heard that Prince had been kind of a diva that night, and that turned out to be true. He didn't want to come over unless he could do a guitar
Prince
solo.
Prince is a little bit of a diva.
But I love him. He's one of my favorites. But
I know, I love him too.
To learn that they were kind of using Sheila E. too, and then she left. Good for her.
Yep.
They were using her to be a placeholder to get him, and then I was never the hugest Huey Lewis fan, but I became a bigger fan of him watching him step into that
totally
with no ego at all. That was just so wonderful. So those parts of it, and that's I don't think I'm ruining it. There's a lot of things there. Oh, Al Jarreau being drunk, very funny. Just all the Michael impersonations that Lionel gave. He's such a hardworking man and such a positive man. And his description of everything was one thing, but then to see the actual footage of where it was getting tense, where egos were starting to,
and they were exhausted.
Bump into each other. And they were exhausted. They had to stay up all night.
Yep.
And then to find out that Bruce wasn't at the American Music Awards. In fact, he had just finished his tour. He flew in, he was in a t-shirt and jeans and came in whatever. Bob Dylan was in there like a scared kitten.
I know.
And then just to watch Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder work the room and have everybody just feel better. And Diana
When
Ross,
Stevie
like
Wonder
just
was going to show Ray Charles where the bathroom was.
that was hilarious. There was
I
a
mean, it's just,
lot of funny. Like I
it
did
was
not
a lot of
think I
funny.
thought it was going to be like you know how there's sometimes if you watched the original like first couple years of Behind the Music,
Mm.
sometimes it was a lot of filler,
Oh,
and it
yeah,
was
yeah.
like there's no lot here, and they're
Right.
trying to stretch this into an hour. That's what I expected this to be, and it was so good. It
It
went by
was
like that,
really
and I
good.
wanted more. And
Yeah.
oh, to find out that the producers didn't want Madonna, but they wanted Cyndi Lauper. That was
Oh,
interesting
I
because
had forgotten
Madonna
about that.
Madonna was like glaringly missing, and there was a lot of
That's
chatter about
true.
that.
Yeah.
And they wanted Cyndi, not her. And I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. But again, one of the things is we had Charlotte watch some of it. She didn't want to watch all of it. We had her watch the part specifically as most of it was over and they were bringing in the solos and they talked very specifically about how they were they picked people based for their parts based on their tenor or their this whether they're a soprano or an alto or whatever. And because Charlotte was in vocal jazz and kind of got moved around a little bit like that as well, it was like we wanted her to see that, and she did. She watched it. She's like, oh yeah, that's exactly how this goes. We start to sing a song, and because if you've ever seen any of my videos, if you follow me on Facebook of Charlotte in vocal jazz, you'll see she's in different parts. They are lined up based on their voice, So she is like a soprano alto. So sometimes she's at the front of the line, sometimes she's in the middle, sometimes she's on the other side, and they do it based on what the song is and what the song needs. So watching that part of it. So again, it goes back to the craft of all this. We, as the public, tend to see the final project. We see the Eras tour. I mean, good Lord, that's a feat in and of itself. But I mean, we see the final project and we just think, privilege, privilege, privilege. They make all this money. Da, 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 da. It is still work. Just because you have a gift to be able to entertain doesn't make your job any less hard. Are they getting paid more than they should? Maybe. Should teachers be getting paid more? Absolutely. It is what it
Yes.
is. But don't diminish their gift in lieu of somebody whose gift is teaching.
Agreed. Yeah.
So
Agreed.
then I was going to ask the same question I asked last week, which is there any documentary you've seen that is like, did I really see that? That was a weird one. Do you have
Uh
any of those?
Wild Wild Country. That was a
What's
docu-series.
that?
Oh my God. It's funny, like you just asked, and I didn't come in here expecting to talk about that. Sometimes I wonder, did I dream that?
I don't know what
It's
that is.
it's about God, I'm gonna have to Google for a second to remember the name. Okay, so it is Wild Wild Country. It's like maybe seven, I don't know. It was on Netflix, and it is all about this very controversial cult or ashram that happened in Eastern Oregon. So I
Oh,
have a lot of people my age that remember all these people dressed in like bright red or pink or orange that were like walking
do
around in
you?
town, and they were do I what?
Oh
Do
no,
I have
because you weren't
memories?
living there
I
then.
wasn't there yet.
Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. Okay.
But like that they came and settled out there in Eastern Oregon. I'm sure, Oregon. Like Eastern Oregon is when you leave Portland, if you're not in Portland or Eugene, you're like we're a very purple state that way. Like
Yes.
you are in some scary country.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's true. And I know people from the Dalles, and they're like, yeah, I mean that there's some sweet people there, but they're very set in their ways and they're very
Yeah.
homogeneous, and especially back then, maybe less so now. But I can't remember why because it's been a little while since I watched it. Because it's like you said, is this a weird dream or what? Every once in a while, I will see somebody dressed like that, like they're
Oh,
part of a
really?
every once in a while, and I will like wonder if it's about that. But when this came out, so many people I knew who grew up here who are they were like, oh yeah, there was like bars where you could go out and see them, or there was bars that were like making fun of it. So it's based on a guru, an Indian guru, the Bhagwan. I think it was Rajneesh. They called him Osho. And there's a lot of books about that. You will, if you're ever in the world of hippies of any kind, there was a lot of people who like worship this guy. And at first, and it's a lot about this woman, Sheila, his personal assistant, and how she helped take this over and what they needed to do to get a critical mass out there to get the neighbors off their back. At
Hmm.
one point, they literally, I felt like they were importing and possibly like kidnapping homeless people from other communities and getting them out there. And then that turned out to be a bad idea because of their behavior. So then they were drugging them in their beer. And then when it didn't work anymore, they literally like drove into Madras, Central Oregon and dropped them off.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then there was also just a multitude of, as there usually is in these cases, multitude of like, you know, like look like speaking a certain way of this chaste lifestyle, but then having like all of these opulent cars and other things and like, you know, sex rooms and things like that. And
Right.
so like it got really it's just sort of like their high times and low times in the pursuit of their, you know, illegal stuff and them fleeing the country. It's
Wow.
every once in a while I'm like, did I dream that? That was so weird. And I remember just getting so sucked in, like, I have to watch the next one. I have to watch the next one.
That is
So
interesting.
yes, that would be that. I would recommend it for that, just because you're like, no way. And then you
Right.
start talking to people and they're like, oh yeah, my friend's dad actually did a whole like investigative reporting thing about it and was like trying to, you know, like, oh, where like someone from I'm remembering these things as we go, like someone sending a poisonous sandwich to him before he held a town hall about it.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah, it's really crazy
Wow. So was
stuff.
this in the 70s or did you say the 80s?
80s, the 80s.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never even heard of any of that. Of course, growing up in the Midwest, we didn't really hear about things that neck of the woods. Interesting. Mine is a very well-known documentary, but I just remember thinking, I fell in love with Rufus Wainwright and he had a song called Grey Gardens. And so I kind of researched what that was. And it is, of course, a very famous documentary about two cousins of Jackie Onassis. And they lived in their mansion called Grey Gardens. And it was the mom and the daughter, Big Edie and Little Edie. And Little Edie, well, they were both just they were unwell mentally, let's just say. And they had all these, they were Bouvier, Jackie Bouvier. I don't know, however you say her maiden name. And I think they always thought they were still part of that society, but they really weren't. And they were the classic like hoarders. Their house was in horrible condition, but they refused to move. But I watched it. I mean, I want to say like a week before I had Charlotte, like I was incredibly pregnant. And I remember like drifting in and out as you do there at the tail end of a pregnancy. So kind of falling asleep and waking up and be like, this is so bizarre. So I know it's not a fever dream, but that is one of those that, as they say, lives rent free in my head for sure.
I keep muting because my dogs are barking. I'm having one of those days where on my end of things are just falling apart over here, but I want a podcast. I want a podcast. I was just listening to that thinking, I feel like you told me about this once and I put it on my list. So I'm going to remember to watch it. That's really interesting.
It is very fascinating. And it is part of the cultural zeitgeist for sure. So much so that Documentary Now, that was their very first episode, the Bill Hader, Fred Armisen, Seth Meyers fake documentaries. That was their very first episode, was a take on Grey Gardens. And Bill Hader plays Little Edie and Fred Armisen plays Big Edie, and it is a classic. It's not as good as the Blue Jean Committee, which is my absolute favorite of all time Documentary Now episode, but it's pretty classic for sure. But you have to see Grey Gardens to understand the Documentary Now version, which I can't remember what they call it, but
you're reminding me how much I love mockumentaries.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there you go. Talk about the classics, Final Tap.
Maybe we need a whole thing like that. Oh, I'm my favorite. Oh my God, I love those. You're okay. So this is so fun how these lead to other things, because I wasn't going to talk about this one either. But right after you and I stayed in LA in the place where they had filmed one of the second season of The Real World.
Yep.
I was like taking down a light fixture and putting one back up, and it was taking me forever. So I decided to put that on and like watch it while I was like kind of doing this little tedious work with these things I had to attach. And it's like, it's affordable because you have to build it yourself. And so I watched The Dark Side of the 90s, and it was so fascinating because it went in like each episode of it was some aspect of not only what was happening, but how it has played out and like evolved into
Mm,
what we are dealing with today, 24-hour news cycle,
yeah.
no privacy, a Twitter, you know, like a constant, just like even the reels and the Instagram and how they come out of that world,
Yeah.
the talk shows that were just over and above. And also, you know, we talked about the Bratpack earlier, but like I don't know what you would call the cooler version of the Bratpack that hung out at the Viper Room, but like
Oh
that whole
yeah.
situation,
Yeah.
right?
Johnny
With like
Depp and
Johnny
River
Depp and River
Phoenix.
Phoenix and Christina
Hmm.
Applegate and Pussycat Dolls, like all that stuff, right? Like
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was happening there. Those things were documented, and then the grunge, you know, thing,
Yeah.
right? So like those things were all documented, and how what was happening in the world with that first Gulf War was like the antidote to that, because suddenly we had a 24-hour news cycle that we hadn't really paid attention to yet. It really
Yep.
wasn't happening yet, but we suddenly had a war on TV. And I
Yep.
remember my mom going, God, I'm so glad they didn't have that when your dad was in Vietnam. That would have been hard for me.
Oh, I bet.
But people were like kind of done with that. So Fox, which was this fledgling, they didn't have a news department yet. That's one, thank God, imagine that.
They spoiler alert, they still don't.
No, they didn't have a legitimate still don't. Back then, sorry, mom. It's true.
These
Back
are the things
then,
we know.
yes. Back then, what Fox did with the little bit of budget that they had, or like the antidote to that was they created 90210. And they did
Ah,
not
yes.
expect, they thought it would be a filler. And
Yeah.
it really flopped at first and then suddenly took off. Everybody wanted that because it was taking their, it just shows maybe how shallow we were at the time, or they just needed something that wasn't 24-hour war.
Yeah.
Well, MTV started to notice that people were like they thought, I was one of the holdouts that was like, I just want the music
A
videos, but they
hundred
thought we
percent.
needed more program television to get people coming back. Because if we didn't like the song, they were changing the channel. But they didn't have a huge budget and they wanted to compete with the 90210, hence the Real World. We don't have a
Mm,
budget. We can't pay for script writers or actors.
yeah.
Let's like see what commences if we just take some people and really limit what they're able to get support around or access to and see what happens. And what was fascinating about that was in this documentary, especially that first one in New York, there was real race conversations happening there about
Yeah.
privilege and the stuff that's still happening today. Those conversations were happening then, and everybody was like on her side, you know, like the white girl's side. They were like, that
Hmm.
wasn't fair of him, you know, like the way everyone was responding to that, or the abortion issue in the second year that happened at the house that we stayed in. The things that are still hot topics now were as hot of a topic then, but like, oh, there was such a conservative response to it, whereas now
Yeah.
there's a lot more of a liberal response to it. It's really interesting. Anyway,
Yeah, I
all of
guess that's
that,
a good way of,
including Trump in the 90s, all of that
well,
was part of it. And
yeah.
so it was fascinating to go back and watch it and think of it as like one slice of time, but like to see it as a slice of time that really laid the foundation for a lot of the shit we just live with now, or that we
Yep.
inherited and that isn't so great. Um,
Well, and the writer strike that happened, then that also that fed into all the
totally.
reality TV and that sort of thing. But yeah, no, I mean it is interesting to go back. Nothing comes out, nothing happens in thin air, or out of whole cloth. Like it is one thing. It is a domino effect. One thing does lead to another. And so there's part of me that goes, Jesus Christ, what are our kids and grandkids in for? Because it just, I remember so distinctly with the Clinton scandal, and that was really the beginning of Fox's heyday. And I remember so distinctly thinking, the genie is out of the bottle. Nothing will ever be the same, and I had, I think back then I was young enough that I probably gave a little. I didn't watch Fox News, God knows, but I would have thought, okay, they're CNN, they're the conservative version of CNN, so I probably gave them a little credence. I give them nothing. I mean, they're literally just laying out their butt left and right, but they just are. They have been found guilty of lying. So I feel very comfortable saying this on our podcast. And it's only, and now what else is out there? I mean, the Newsmaxes and the news and all the things. It's just,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
lot. It's a lot. There'll be lots more documentaries in our later years and our as our children get older to go back and look at, oh, remember
COVID.
2015?
Jeez. Oh
You
yeah,
know?
definitely.
Uh, but I
Yeah.
do love documentaries.
I've watched a lot about things that I like wanted to go back and remember, even, like about Columbine or
Yeah.
911, 9/11. I don't know why I said 911 because Fahrenheit 9/11 is when I watched. But anyway,
Yeah.
I've watched a lot of those. Um, and I think that's what our kids will do to understand it, go back and like
Yeah.
watch them. And they're always going to be with their own bias, but
Of
it's
course.
fascinating. There's some really good ones out there. Um, that leads me to like, just because we're talking about that time of life, like it also like I watched one about George Michael that he produced himself and was working on when he died. Was hadn't finished. I shouldn't say he was working on it when he died, but he hadn't finished it. So a lot of it is his narration, not all of it.
Mm.
And a lot of it is like the story he wanted to tell. And that's heartbreaking for me. Because I really did love Wham when I was young, didn't even know
Yeah.
they were
Oh yeah.
gay, or him. I'm sorry, Andrew originally wasn't,
No.
but his story is, his voice is so beautiful and
Mm-hmm.
his style of songwriting is so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And his ability to like connect with music and other artists and like redo some of theirs, but with them. And I don't know, I just thought that was beautiful, but what a like a story of someone who, like we were talking about Andrew McCarthy, like someone who just didn't have, he was so fragile in terms of like
Yeah.
his self-esteem and
Well, and it was a different time. I mean, he had to
yeah.
hide so much of it, you know.
Hmm.
And so again, I go back to where we started because you say George Michael, I think of the Michael Hutchins one that came out,
Oh,
you know, that was
I
also
haven't seen that,
heartbreaking.
but I would love to see that.
Yeah, because I mean, his death was unusual and pretty much came
An
from him
accident.
falling off a bike and hitting his head and he was never the same again, you know. And so I think we can end going back to where we were at the beginning. When the interesting thing about documentaries, you might go into something, especially if you're watching something that includes celebrities, and think you're gonna have some Schadenfreude and be like, and they're still human beings. They're still human beings, and it's they're just fascinating to watch all the different parts of life that probably you and I will never know. Um, but I think when you watch those types of things, and of course, documentaries have their own bent as well, but I think you get a sense of humanity,
Hmm.
in different ways.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
because we've run the gamut here today talking about these.
We have. I feel like there's so many more. Like all this. When we went into this, I'm like, I haven't watched that many. I'm like, oh my God, I really have so many because Brendan and I are almost done watching Beckham,
Oh
and
yeah.
that documentaries are such a great thing for everyone to watch to like really check what you thought you believed or
Yes.
what you got from skimming the news, and then to find out it told in that actual person's perspective.
Yeah.
Am I super like aware of European soccer only to the extent that I watch Welcome to Wrexham and I
Right.
watch Ted Lasso? So no.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
and I have a lot of people in my life who are really into that, so I'm adjacent to it. And
Sure.
I like my local, Major League women's and men's team. So it's not like I know nothing, but what I do know is like it's a religion over there. It's a way of like
Yes.
people go crazy over it. So all I knew about David Beckham is that he was married to Posh Spice. He was a good soccer player who, for some reason, decided to come and play in LA, which changed soccer in this country. Like he really did by
Hmm.
doing that. So like our MLS owes him a great deal of gratitude. But I didn't know that, and I remember Bend It Like Beckham. That was a
Hmm.
great film. That like his story is so interesting. It's not what you would think. He's like seems so confident and fashionable, but he was a really shy kid. His dad was super hard on him. He didn't really have a lot of friends. It meant everything to him to marry her and have his kids. And also when he, lost his shit in that one game against Argentina, and I think it was Argentina, and he got and he got the red card and got sent off and lost it for his country. He was hated. People were hanging dummies of him by the neck and like telling him he was a disgrace and he'd let his country down. The coach sold him out. Tony Blair sold him out. Like
Wow.
he was 23 and
Mm,
he was abused and people were coming up to him on the street spitting in his face. Like it was an awful time. He and Victoria could barely talk about it without crying, and his teammates and friends at the time were like, we didn't even let him go to the bathroom alone. um that was interesting. That was fascinating, and how it's changed him, and just also like how he, in ways he didn't let it change him, and like just who he is like this really sweet dad. And so it like in my mind, there's a caricature of him. And then to
yeah.
sit down and watch something like that, which I really wasn't thinking I wanted to watch till someone said, oh, you should watch it. You'll like it. Kind of like Supermodels. When I watched that, like I didn't think I wanted to watch it. And I was totally into it because it just shows you like, oh, I guess I was believing what was coming into my brain space when I was in a grocery store line. I was
As we
believing
do.
stuff.
Yeah.
Even though
Yeah.
like logically I know that stuff's sensational, those things took residence in my mind. Bratpack, Beckham Posh, like
Yep.
anything. You
Yeah.
name it. If there's a documentary about it, it's going to tell me way more
Yes.
or
Absolutely.
tell me the truth.
Yeah. Or another part of the truth. Because
Mm-hmm.
again, it's still everything's somewhat subjective, but another part of the truth, another piece of the puzzle for sure.
One honorable mention, because I have mentioned this before in a previous episode last year. Calendar Girls is so good. It's
Oh,
not like
yeah.
the series, but it's like those older women who join a drill team. And what's really fascinating about it is the husbands get interviewed and how they don't like it. Suddenly, their wives, now that they're retired, their wives like are busier and have something to do, and they're not taking care of them. And these women like, I don't care. This is for me, and it is so good.
Love that. All right. Well, there's a whole list. Again, we'll go back and make a list so that we can put it on our social medias if you didn't catch all of these. And if you have seen any of them, we'd love to hear from you. And if you have additional ones you think Carrie and I should watch based on what we've just been talking about, we would love to hear that too. And next week, we'll be back with our final episode for July, our little summer break on a little more lighthearted fare. Although, again, not all these documentaries are lighthearted, but we'll be back to talk about music and our favorite music and concerts and the things that have shaped us, because concerts are our music is our thing. That being said, once again, we did not pick a song. But you know what we'll do? We'll use Grey Gardens from Rufus Wainwright. That's what we'll
Oh,
use.
that's a good idea.
I don't have the lyrics in front of me, but that will be on our playlist.
Perfect.
All right. Well, we'll be back next week, everyone. Thanks as always for listening.